Now going to go to member questions, and first we'll recognize the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Lamborn, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having this hearing. I want to thank all the witnesses for being here this morning. I have here in my hand a letter from Laura Daniel Davis, Principal Deputy Assistant Director at the Department of Interior, dated December 8th, 2022, that has some very interesting statistics on the Biden administration's approval rate for applications for permits to drill. So, Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to, and it's to me and 43 of my colleagues. I asked unanimous consent to introduce this letter into the record.
Without objection.
Specifically, in this letter, the Biden administration is taking credit for what the Trump administration accomplished. This letter states, quote, the BLM approved 5,145 APDs, applications for permits to drill, in fiscal year 2021, surpassing the fiscal year 2020 total of 4,600 approximately approvals. This period includes the last few months of the Trump presidency, when the Department of the Interior was approving APDs at an unprecedented rate. According to a 2020 GAO report, APD review times decreased from 196 days to 94 days between 2016 and 2019. Curiously, the Department of Interior is no longer publishing its month-by-month breakdown of approved APDs, which previous administrations have done. So, Ms. Sagama, can you please talk about how the APD approval process has changed under President Biden? What's that doing to American energy production?
Well, I think initially the rate went, it's been fluctuating. The monthly rate of approved APDs has been fluctuating. Would we wish that the federal bureaucracy could be more consistent in approving permits? Certainly. And sometimes if there was more regularity and more certainty on when we'd get a permit, we wouldn't have to request permits so far in advance. But generally, we have seen the rates kind of fluctuate, coming and going. I think when it comes to federal lands, we're a little bit more concerned with the games being played on the leasing side, because if leasing dries up, as it has with the initial Biden ban on leasing, then we're really concerned about future production. But the permits have they've stabilized. We're getting permits, not as quickly as would be efficient, but I think we're more concerned about the leasing aspect right now.
Okay, and a similar question. Our friends across the aisle like to bring up the fact that there are 9,000 approved permits to drill across the U.S. which remain unused. And so the implication is that energy companies are derelict in their pursuit of their own interests, to pursue energy and make a profit and create jobs off of that. But aren't there a lot of reasons why an APD not be used? And could you elaborate on that, Ms. Sagama? And what can be done to make those 9,000 outstanding APDs more usable?
Sure,
if that's what we all really want.
Yeah, I appreciate that question, because when the press secretary brought up 9,000 permits about a year ago, it certainly raised the issue. There are about 8,600 permits that have been approved that have not been used yet, and that's as of September. So we don't know the actual up-to-date number.
Why?
Well, there are a variety of reasons. As I mentioned earlier, the inefficiency of getting a permit means that companies often request permits years in advance, because if you have started a project, we drill wells really quickly now. We're so efficient and we drill so many on a well pad that you can't afford to start your project, drill 1 or 2 wells, and then have to wait for 2 more permits, because you're going to put, 8 wells on that pad or whatever it is. So in order to stay ahead of your rig, you need an inventory of permits. And since you don't know if it's going to take 6 months or 2 years to get your permit, you often get those permits in hand before you even start the project and have them in hand for a couple of years in advance. So that's one of the reasons. The other is simply you might be waiting for a right-of-way from the federal government. You might be waiting for, in order to get to your well pad, you have to get across a piece of federal land, so you need a permit for that. You might be held up waiting for an air permit. So there are other reasons that we don't use those permits right away.
Or litigation?
Yeah, well, we've just had a case last week in New Mexico where a judge called into question about 370 permits in New Mexico. We have litigation from environmental groups on about 4,000 permits in New Mexico and Wyoming.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Thank you, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.